Welcome to Skinner and Chalmers Weekly Roast. Today, what a bovine conundrum. Gary goes off the rails, responsibly.
Good evening, Memfield. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Weekly Roast. I'm Seymour Skinner, and I am recording tonight's episode in a state of what I can only describe as deep, sustained, loving smugness.
I was wondering when we were going to get to the smugness.
Gary.
Please don't say my name 4 times. It's not a summoning ritual.
My rock, my voice of reason and geological precision and meteorological authority. My superintendent, last Saturday.
We're doing this.
Last Saturday, Gary Chalmers, a man who has, over many years, positioned himself as the measured, responsible, sensible half of this partnership.
I am the measured, responsible, sensible half of this partnership.
Came home at 5:10 in the morning, via taxi, slightly pink in the face, absolutely full of yip, whoop, whoop wine, and delivered to me, completely unprompted, a lecture about cows.
I'm Gary Chalmers, superintendent, geologist, meteorologist, and apparently on certain evenings with certain colleagues and a certain quantity of a certain wine, also a bovine philosopher. Welcome to the Weekly Roast.
He said bovine philosopher. He's already embracing it.
I have had a full week to process my shame and come out the other side into something like acceptance. It's fine. We're talking about it. It's fine.
It's completely fine. It's more than fine. It's one of my favorite evenings in recent memory, and I wasn't even at the reunion.
You were asleep on the sofa when I got home.
I was resting my eyes on the sofa. There is a difference. I was awake. I was present. I had been waiting since midnight.
Since midnight.
I stayed up until 5:10 in the morning to make sure you got home safely, Gary. Because that is what you do. You wait for someone you care, for someone you love.
Ah, that's sweet. I know. And I knew when I came in and saw you on the sofa that you'd been there for hours. Which, for the record, I found, well...
touching, maybe.
Very touching. Yes, don't make it weird.
I'm not making it weird. I'm making it an episode.
Which is arguably weirder.
It's episode. Appropriate weird. There's a scale.
Right? Background. Context. Because I want to be clear about how this evening began before we get to the later portions of the evening.
The cow portions.
We will get to the cow portions. First, the reunion itself, which was entirely dignified and wonderful.
It was wonderful when you've told me about it. Tell them.
Some years ago, many years ago now, I was a university lecturer before the superintendency, before Memfield even. I had colleagues during that period who were genuinely good people. Smart, interesting, dedicated. The kind of colleagues you form a real bond with over years of shared work and shared frustrations and shared terrible departmental coffee.
Academic bonds are very specific bonds.
They're forged in seminar rooms and faculty meetings and the particular misery of marking 300 papers over a bank holiday weekend. You either come out of that experience despising each other or very fond of each other, and we came out fond.
And then life happened.
People moved, took different positions, started families, the usual dispersal. We stayed in vague contact, messages at Christmas, the occasional email. But we hadn't actually been in the same room together for years. And someone, Margot, I think it was probably Margot organized a dinner. A proper sit-down, everyone, in one place, catch-up dinner at a restaurant in the city, and I went.
He went on his own, like a social person.
I am a social person, Seymour. I'm selectively social. There's a meaningful distinction.
He prepared for the dinner for 3 days in advance. He had a list of topics.
I had a list of conversation reference points so that I could...
He had a list.
I had a short list of potential topics, in case there were lulls.
Were there lulls?
There were absolutely no lulls whatsoever. I didn't consult the list once. From the moment we sat down at the table until the moment I got into the taxi, there was not a single second of silence that wasn't comfortable and chosen.
That's lovely, Gary.
It was lovely. It was genuinely, properly lovely. These are people who knew me when I was 32 and very certain about everything and still learning to be less certain. And they were kind about it then, and they're kind about it now.
How many of you were there?
6 in total. Margot, who now runs her own research institute, which is absolutely characteristic of her. She always had the most organizational drive of any of us. James, who retired early and has been growing obscenely good tomatoes on a small farm and is very smug about it.
As one should be. A good tomato is worth smugness.
Tell that Bartholomew.
I've heard that. And I can totally confirm, dudes.
Yeah, anyways, Priya, who is now a dean at a university I deeply respect and who has not changed one atom in 20 years, which is either genetics or sheer force of will. David, who was always the funniest person in any room and still is, which is unfair because he's also one of the cleverest. And Renata, who spent the first hour of dinner telling us about her research into deep-sea thermal vents and had the table completely riveted.
Deep-sea thermal vents? Gary, you must have been in your element?
I was fully in my element. Renata and I had an extended side conversation about the geological relationship between hydrothermal activity and mineral deposit formation that David later described as the nerdiest thing he'd witnessed since the 2009 departmental retreat, and he said it with great affection.
This is everything. This is Gary in his natural habitat.
I was happy. I want to say that clearly. Before we get to the wine situation, I was very happy that evening. Those people matter to me. Seeing them mattered to me. Whatever happened later with the yip, whoop, whoop was the direct result of being so happy that my usual calibration went offline.
His usual calibration went offline. Listeners, that is how Gary Chalmers describes getting a bit too merry with old friends. His calibration went offline.
It's an accurate description.
It's a beautiful description, Gary. Genuinely.
Now, the wine problem.
The wine!
The restaurant had a very good wine list, and someone, I believe it was David, spotted that they stocked whoop, the reserve selection, not the standard, the reserve.
The reserve! Now it's getting interesting.
The whoop reserve is considerably more robust than the standard vintage. It has a...
Gary is about to describe wine with the vocabulary he uses for rock formations.
It has a deep layered quality, complex on the palate. Notes of, I want to say dark fruit, something earthy underneath, and a finish that is deceptively long.
Deceptively long.
Which is the operative word as it turned out.
The wine was deceptive.
The wine was operating on a timeline that I did not fully appreciate until considerably after the third glass.
How many glasses were there?
The evening is somewhat non-linear in my memory after a certain point.
Gary.
The bottle was shared between 6 people, which is entirely reasonable. There may have been a second bottle at some point.
There was a second bottle? For real?
There was a second bottle, yes. And I can tell you that David ordered it with what I now recognize as the expression of a man who has made a decision he knows will be funny to retell later.
David ordered the second bottle knowingly.
I guess so, and I walked directly into it because I was talking to Renata about hydrothermal gradients and not paying attention to the volume in my glass.
The thermal vents were a distraction from the volume monitoring.
Renata bears some responsibility for this. I will not be taking questions.
So what did you tell them? About life? About Memfield? About me?
I told them. And I want to be clear that everything I told them was true and not wine embellished, at least up until a certain point in the evening.
The calibration point.
The calibration point, yes. I told them about the superintendency, about Memfield High School, about Monty Python the Python, our school mascot.
What did they make of the snake mascot?
Priya immediately asked whether we'd considered the Python programming language connection before naming him, which I was able to confirm we had, and she seemed satisfied. Renata asked about the ecological care requirements of a ball python in a school environment, which led to a 15-minute discussion that was very informative and which I have notes on somewhere.
Of course you have notes.
I told them about you.
Oh, what did you tell them about me?
I told them you were a school principal, that you were... I want to get the exact words right because I remember this part clearly. The most persistently optimistic person I've ever known, which is exhausting and also the reason I'm still standing upright most days.
Gary.
Margot said that sounded like a love letter wrapped in a complaint, and I told her that was basically the defining format of our relationship, and she laughed.
That's very sweet, Gary, that you described me that way.
I also mentioned the cooking.
Better not, to be honest.
I may have described, with some animation, the fennel situation and the Quitch incident of 2019 and the time the Ruba was served as a garnish.
How much animation?
David had to put his glass down. He was laughing, Seymour. He was laughing with great warmth. They all were. You came across as beloved. You came across as someone whose particular chaos is clearly cherished by the person describing it.
Okay, I'll take that.
I told them about our son Alexander, about the band.
Oh, how did that go over?
I played them a clip on my phone, the one from the second performance, the one where Alexander hits the high note at the end and it goes in an unexpected direction.
The audience reaction clip.
The audience reaction clip. David had to put his glass down again for different reasons.
Alexander was finding his voice. You cannot judge artistic development by early performances.
Nobody was judging, they were responding physically to the art, which is a valid form of engagement.
Finding his voice, he found it eventually. He found it quite well, actually.
He absolutely did. I made that clear. The development arc was part of the story. By the end of the story, they were genuinely cheering for Alexander.
Were they?
Margot said, and I'm quoting, "That boy has a father who believes in him completely and you can hear it," which made me, he stopped.
Gary, don't start crying on the podcast.
I was fine. It was fine. It was the wine beginning its extended finish.
It was not only the wine.
No, it was not only the wine.
Right, so, after dinner, the taxi, walk us through it.
After dinner, we said our goodbyes outside the restaurant, which took considerably longer than planned because everyone kept remembering one more thing to say and one more thing to arrange and one more promise to make about doing this again sooner rather than never. Margot has already sent a group message about a date in spring, which I have noted in my calendar.
Gary noted it in his calendar immediately.
I noted it the next morning when I had regained full use of my faculties. I told them I'd be in touch and I meant it and I will be. And then I got in a taxi.
That you can even remember the next morning. But well, you got in a taxi. Because
I had consumed significantly more yip, whoop than I would normally consider appropriate, and I would not under any circumstances have driven home. I want to say this clearly and seriously for a moment, because it matters you do not drive when you have been drinking. Full stop. Not, I've only had a couple. Not, it's not far. Not, I feel fine. You do not drive. You take a taxi, you call someone, you wait, you walk if it's walkable, but you do not get behind a wheel when you have alcohol in your system, because the risk is not only to you, it is to every other person on that road who made no choice to be involved in your evening whatsoever.
Completely, absolutely, non-negotiably correct, well said Gary.
I called the taxi before I left the restaurant, responsible sequencing.
And then you sat in the taxi for 40 minutes getting philosophically rearranged by the yip, whoop reserve.
The deceptively long finish continued to develop during transit, yes. By the time I arrived home, I had reached what I can only describe as a state of elevated certainty about several things that, in retrospect, did not require certainty.
He arrived home at 5:10 in the morning. I was on the sofa. I heard the taxi. I heard the key in the lock. And then the door opened and Gary came in, and he was pink.
I was warm. It was a warm evening.
Gary, it was start of May. It's not 30 degrees Celsius in May nights.
The yip, whoop reserve generates its own ambient temperature. That's in the tasting notes.
I looked at him and I said, Gary, did you have a good time? And he said,
I said, Seymour, an excellent time. A genuinely excellent time. These are very good people. I am fortunate. Which I maintain is a perfectly coherent and accurate statement.
It was coherent and accurate? And then he sat down next to me on the sofa, and he looked at me very seriously.
I was being earnest.
He was being very earnest, to be clear, guys.
There's nothing wrong with earnestness.
And he said, Seymour, I need to tell you something about yourself.
We're really doing this.
We promised the listeners, Gary.
We did promise.
Do you want to tell it or shall I?
I'll tell it. I was there. I might as well own it. So, I sat down next to Seymour, and it occurred to me, and I want to stress that this felt at the time like a fully coherent scientific observation. It occurred to me that there is a theory, a well-established principle. You are what you eat. which is, in its simplified form, a comment on how the materials you consume become part of your physical composition. This is biochemically grounded. This is real. And Seymour had, earlier that week, consumed a beef stew.
A very good beef stew, actually. One of my better ones.
Which I acknowledged, I said. I believe I said, the stew was one of your better efforts, Seymour, which is a low bar, but it cleared it cleanly.
He said that, in that exact order.
And therefore, by the principle of you are what you eat, there was, I concluded, a cow inside Seymour.
There was a cow inside me, according to yip, yip, whoop, whoop-filled Chalmers.
Somewhere in there, yes, partially, a partial cow, based on the beef stew.
And Gary told me this with the expression of a man delivering important geological findings.
I was presenting data, and then I extended the hypothesis, as any rigorous thinker would.
He extended the hypothesis.
Because the cow, I noted, would also have eaten things during its lifetime, grass, presumably grain, possibly other things, and therefore the cow inside Seymour contained within it everything the cow had eaten, which meant there was technically a smaller cow inside the cow inside Seymour.
A cow inside me.
Recursively. In theory, you could extend this indefinitely. Every consumed entity contains its own history of consumption. It's a kind of digestive nested structure.
And this is what you told me at 5:10 in the morning.
I told you this, and then I waited for you to engage with the logic, which, to your credit,
I said, what a bovine conundrum. I said, what a bovine conundrum, because what else do you say to that? What possible other response exists?
It was the correct response, actually. Bovine conundrum is precisely accurate. I told you that at the time.
You told me it was satisfying encapsulation of the paradox, yes.
Because it was. It is. The recursive consumption problem is genuinely, look, stripped of the wine context, the question of how far back you trace the composition of any given organism through what it has consumed is a real philosophical and biological question.
Gary.
I'm just saying the underlying logic was not entirely without merit.
Gary.
I was very drunk.
You were very, very drunk.
I was operating at reduced calibration.
You were absolutely funny, and I've thought about the nested cow theory at least 4 times this week.
You have?
It's not entirely wrong, Gary. I've looked into it. It raises genuine questions about...
Please do not tell me you've been researching the cow theory.
I've been lightly researching the cow theory.
Right?
But wait, we haven't told them the best part. The bit that came after the nested cow revelation.
There was more, yes. I had follow-up observations.
Gary was sitting on the sofa, fully committed to this intellectual framework, and after I said, what a bovine conundrum, he got a look on his face.
I was thinking.
He was visibly thinking. You could see the thoughts happening, which, when Gary is sober, is not always visible, because he processes internally, but at reduced calibration the processing was external.
The thoughts were somewhat more external than usual, yes.
And then he turned to me very seriously and said, Seymour, the dahlias?
I'm not sure I need to elaborate on the dahlias.
You absolutely need to elaborate on the dahlias.
I noted that Bartholomew tends the dahlias, and that the dahlias grow in soil that is partly composed of organic material from previous plant life and decomposed matter, and therefore Bartholomew, who occasionally eats, well, he doesn't eat, he's a skeleton, but he handles the soil and soil gets on hands. Gloves, he wears gloves.
Gary, you told me at 5 in the morning that Bartholomew was made of dahlias.
I said he was partially constituted by the same material as the dahlias, which is technically.
Bartholomew and the dahlias are more similar than he knows, Seymour. That's what you said.
I said that.
You said that, and then you looked out the window at the garden. It was just starting to get light. And you said, the garden is a closed system of souls, Seymour.
Yeah, I kinda did that.
You did. And Gary, I want to say this to you directly and for the record. That is one of the most beautiful things you have ever said to me.
It's not scientific.
It's poetic, Gary, and it's also possibly true. The garden has Bartholomew, who was in the ground for years and is now above it, but tends it, and the dahlias, and Cosmo and the puppies who wander through it, and Mary in the pool at its edge.
A closed system of souls.
A closed system of souls.
I want to be clear that this observation was produced by a suboptimal cognitive state and should not be taken as representative of my usual.
I've already told Bartholomew.
You told Bartholomew?
I told him the next morning. I said, Jerry said the garden is a closed system of souls. And Bartholomew stood very still for a moment and then said, Do you want to know what he said, Gary?
What did he say?
He said, Mr. Chalmers is occasionally wiser than he intends to be.
He said that. Well, I'm not sure if that was a diss or a compliment.
He absolutely said that, and then he went back to the dahlias.
The man, the skeleton, has a point.
He really does. And then, after the dahlias, the goats.
I had thoughts about Van Goat.
Gary had extensive thoughts about Van Goat.
I want to say that my assessment of Van Goat's political situation, while delivered at reduced calibration, was not inaccurate.
You told me, and I'm reading directly from the notes I wrote down while you were talking because I had the presence of mind to grab my phone.
You wrote notes?
I wrote notes? I knew they'd be important. You said, Seymour, Van Goat has been mayor for a significant period. They eat everything they disagree with. They measure things with a tape measure and then eats the notes. This is not governance, Seymour. This is territorial grazing with administrative pretensions.
That is a fair characterization of Van Goat's mayoral style, actually.
Territorial grazing with administrative pretensions. Gary, that's almost better than Bovine Conundrum.
I was on a roll, and I stand by the Van Goat assessment. Sober, right now. Territorial grazing with administrative pretensions is precisely what's happening, and I should have put that in an official report months ago.
Should I transcribe the notes and submit them to the town council?
Remove the parts that were clearly wine-specific and possibly.
I'm submitting the notes.
Lightly edited notes.
Lightly edited notes. Done. After the Van Goat analysis, there was a quieter moment. Tell them about the quiet moment.
After the various theoretical contributions to bovine philosophy and garden metaphysics and municipal governance, I went quiet for a bit, which Seymour has told me looked like I'd suddenly gotten very calm.
He just settled, like something had gone still in him, and he looked around the room, at the rubus parked neatly along the skirting board, and through the window at the garden starting to get light, and he said very quietly, I've had a very good life, Seymour.
I have.
I know.
I was sitting there in the early morning in a living room full of things that are mine, that are ours, and I just spent an evening with people who knew me when I was young and still liked me now, and I'd come home and you were on the sofa,
resting my eyes,
waiting, and I just felt it, the weight of it, the good weight. You know how sometimes you get a moment of seeing your life from the outside, briefly, and in that moment you see it clearly.
I know that feeling.
I saw it clearly at 5 in the morning with residual yip, yip, whoop, whoop reserve in my system and 17 Roombas parked against the wall and a skeleton in the garden. And my conclusion was I've had a very good life. I have a very good life, and that felt worth saying.
And then you fell asleep on the sofa mid-sentence.
Oh, did I?
Mid-sentence, you said, and the thing about the cows is, and then you were gone.
I had finished the important observation. The rest was supplementary.
He was snoring within 30 seconds. I put a blanket over him and went to bed.
You put a blanket over me.
Of course I put a blanket over you. What else would I do?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Gary.
Right. A few practical reflections, because I believe practical reflections have their place even in absurdist episodes.
Gary's going to be responsible now. Gary's calibration is fully online.
My calibration is fully online. First, yip, yip, whoop, whoop reserve. It is excellent. It is also formidable. It is not to be approached without awareness of its extended finish. If you are going to drink wine of this quality, respect it. Drink water alongside it. Eat something substantial. And for the love of everything sensible,
taxi. Call a taxi.
Taxi. Always. Non-negotiably. Every single time. I planned the taxi before I had a single glass, which is the right order of operations. You make the safe choice first while your judgment is intact, not last, when it may not be.
Gary is absolutely right about this, and we want everyone listening to really take that in.
It's not dramatic. It's not complicated. It's just don't drive. Your life, other people's lives. Not worth it. Never worth it.
Now, before we wrap up, the reunion. Are you going to see them again?
Yes. Margaret's already organized the spring date. I've confirmed it. I will be there.
And this time?
This time I will be more attentive to the volume in my glass during discussions of hydrothermal vent geology.
And if Renata starts talking about thermal gradients,
I'll try to maintain peripheral awareness of the wine situation while also engaging fully with the thermal gradients. It's a balance.
a very Gary balance.
It's the correct balance. And this time, Seymour, you don't need to stay up until 5 in the morning. You can go to bed.
And if I don't want to,
Then I'll expect to see you on the sofa.
you will absolutely see me on the sofa.
Good.
And that, Memfield, is the story of Gary Chalmers' reunion evening, the yip yip, whoop whoop reserve, the nested cow theory, the garden as a closed system of souls, Van Gogh's territorial grazing with administrative pretensions, and one of the loveliest early mornings this household has had in recent memory.
It was a good evening, from start to finish, including the parts I'm slightly embarrassed about.
Especially those parts? I'm Seymour Skinner.
I'm Gary Chalmers, superintendent, geologist, meteorologist, and on one specific October evening, bovine philosopher.
Good night, Memfield.
Good night, and drink responsibly. Really, don't overdo it. It's not good for your body. Stay away from any alcohol if possible.
I agree. Oh, and the thing about the cows is,
Good night.
well, good night.